The phone rang at 11:40 at night. I already knew what it was going to be before I answered. Not because I'm psychic, because I'd spent 3 months learning his voice, the way you learn weather, and something in the air that day had already told me a storm was coming. "I think we need a break." That was how he opened it. Soft, reasonable, like he'd rehearsed the kindness in a mirror. "I know I was off tonight. I just need some time." He said it the way a man says something he has said before, to someone else in a different year. I didn't know that yet, but I would. Before we get into what happened after that call, I need to take you back to the beginning, because the horror in this story isn't a moment, it's a shape, and you only see the shape once you know where every piece goes. I'm Dark Veil. This is a true account, inspired by the man who lived it. Some details have been changed to protect his privacy. What hasn't changed is what it felt like from the inside. His name was Desmond Farrow, mayor of Vantage City for 6 years running, 2 terms deep. The kind of local politician who showed up on morning news segments, cutting ribbons and looking exactly as good as you'd expect a mayor to look on camera. My name is Julian Ames. I was 29. I sold commercial real estate, and I had never, not once, dated anyone whose face appeared on a bus stop bench. We met at a fundraiser. A mutual friend introduced us because apparently that's just something mutual friends do. Hand you off to powerful men like you're a party favor. Desmond found me by the bar an hour in. He didn't ask what I did for work. He asked what I was afraid of. Nobody had ever opened with that question before. I told him heights, mostly, and the ocean at night, and he nodded like I'd confirmed something he already suspected about me. A donor tried to join the conversation a few minutes later, complimenting Desmond on a housing initiative. Desmond thanked him for exactly 2 seconds and then turned the conversation smoothly back to me. Not because he wasn't interested in the donor, because the room's attention was supposed to end up wherever he decided it should be. I didn't notice that as a pattern yet. I noticed it as flattering. The first date was 2 nights later. Dinner at a restaurant I couldn't have afforded on my own. The kind of place where the menu doesn't list prices because if you have to ask, you don't belong. He talked about his husband for the first time that night. Told me he'd passed 2 years earlier. Heart condition. Sudden. No warning. He delivered the whole story with a practiced kind of grief. Smooth edges. No stumbling. I remember thinking at the time that grief doesn't usually sound rehearsed. I didn't think much more about it than that. By the end of the night, we were back at his place, and things moved further than I'd planned for a first date. I want to be honest about that part, because it matters later. I wasn't uncomfortable exactly. I was something closer to sweat. He kept saying I felt right, not the night felt right, that I did. Like I was the answer to something he'd been solving for a long time. What came next moved fast. faster than anything reasonable. Calls every morning at 7:15, timed with a precision I found charming before I found it strange. Long calls at night, too, sometimes past midnight. His voice low, like he didn't want anyone else in whatever building he was in to hear him talking to me. Texts throughout the day that always seemed to land exactly when I needed them. A compliment right after a hard meeting. A joke right when I was bored on a drive. He told me he loved me 11 days in. I remember counting because it startled me. 11 days felt too fast and also, somehow, exactly right. The way everything with him managed to feel both. I said it back 4 days after that. I'd never said it that early to anyone. I told myself it was different with him because everything about knowing him already felt different, bigger, like the rules that governed normal dating didn't apply to a man who'd been photographed shaking hands with senators. He mentioned taking me to Portugal eventually, said he had a place there, said we'd go once the council session wrapped. He mentioned Chicago, too. A weekend, just the two of us, someday soon. Someday soon turned into a phrase I heard often. It always came wrapped in a reason that sounded, in the moment, completely reasonable. So we stayed on the phone instead. He sent me videos from wherever he was, a sunset from a hotel balcony in another city, a plate of food at dinner I wasn't invited to, always with the same version of the same caption. Wish you were here. Can't wait to see you. I lived inside that sentence for weeks. It made the distance feel like circumstance instead of choice. I told my sister about him over the phone, and she asked if it felt like a lot. I said it felt like being chosen. She didn't say anything for a second, and then she said, "Those aren't always the same thing, Jules." I laughed it off, but I remember the exact hallway I was standing in when she said it. That's the kind of detail your body keeps, even when your brain waves it away. There were other things, small enough that none of them seemed worth mentioning on their own. How he'd call to say goodnight and somehow end up talking about his day for 40 minutes before asking about mine. How he introduced me to donors on speakerphone as someone very important to me, but never once as his boyfriend. How every story he told about his late husband ended with some version of the same line. He understood me completely. I used to think that was the highest compliment a person could give you. I didn't examine it much closer than that. I was too busy noticing how different my life felt from the inside of the phone. How many names I suddenly recognized when he mentioned them. How many people, when I did meet them in passing, already seemed to know mine. 6 weeks of this, 6 weeks of I love you and I wish you were here and someday soon. 6 weeks of a relationship that existed almost entirely in the space between two phones, so that by the time we finally had a night to actually see each other again, it felt less like a date and more like a reunion. Like something that had been building toward a particular kind of ending, the good kind, for over a month. I didn't clock it yet that I hadn't chosen most of what filled those 6 weeks. He had. Every call, every video, every someday soon on his schedule, in his voice, at exactly the hour he decided to reach for his phone. I just knew that when he texted to confirm dinner, my hands were shaking a little. 6 weeks was a long time to wait for fireworks. We hit a rough patch around month 3. Scheduling conflicts, a canceled flight, a fundraiser he had to cancel on me twice. So, when we finally landed a night to see each other again, I expected fireworks. 6 weeks of near misses building up to one dinner. Instead, from the moment he sat down across from me, something was off. I don't mean angry. I don't mean cold. I mean off. The way a song is off when someone hits a note a half a step flat. Technically, still a song, still recognizable, but your body knows before your ears finish processing it. He was charming still. He complimented my jacket. He held my hand across the table at one point, thumb moving over my knuckles the exact way it always did. But his eyes kept drifting to a spot somewhere past my shoulder, like he was checking something, grading something. Midway through the appetizer, he excused himself for the bathroom. The second he was out of sight, our waiter leaned in close over the table, refilling my water glass with a hand that wasn't quite steady. "Girl," he said, low, fast, like he only had one shot at saying it. "Run!" I laughed because I didn't know what else to do with a sentence like that. He didn't laugh back. "I've worked this section for 4 years," he said. "I've seen him do this dinner before. Same table even. I recognize the look on your face. It's the exact same look the last one had." Then Desmond was walking back across the room, and the waiter straightened up, and by the time Desmond sat back down, the waiter was gone, and I was left holding a sentence I didn't know what to do with. "Girl, run." Classic narcissist behavior, he'd said, and I should know. I didn't ask what he meant by that. I wish I had. The rest of dinner went fine, on the surface. We said goodbye at the valet stand with a normal kiss, a normal "see you soon." I got home a little after 10. I remember sitting on the couch, still in my jacket, replaying the waiter's face, trying to decide if I'd imagined the weight in his voice. The phone rang at 11:40. "I think we need a break." He told me he knew he'd been off that night. He told me it wasn't about me, it was about him. He just needed space to figure some things out. He used the word space 4 times in the call. I counted, the same way you count something when your mind needs somewhere safe to land. I asked if this was about something specific. There was a pause, a long one, long enough that I could hear him breathing, deciding what version of the truth to tell me. "You remind me a lot of someone," he said finally. "Sometimes that's a comfort. Tonight, it wasn't." He didn't say the name. I didn't ask for it. I hung up, feeling something I couldn't name yet, a mixture of relief and grief that made no sense sitting right next to each other like that. Relief that it was over, grief for a version of the last 3 months I'd let myself believe in. It would take me weeks to understand why both feelings were correct. In the months after, I did what anyone does. I replayed it. I told the story to friends who all had the same reaction. Some version of, he sounds intense. And I laughed and said, yeah, he really was. It took a conversation with a coworker, someone who mentioned almost in passing that she had dated a man like that once, for me to hear a phrase that cracked the whole thing open. It's not dating when someone does that, she said. It's auditions. I sat with that a long time, because that's exactly what it had been. The 715 calls weren't affection, they were consistency testing, seeing how reliable I'd show up for someone else's schedule. The flights weren't romance, they were investment. The kind you make in something you're deciding whether to keep or not. The hand on my neck in public, it wasn't tenderness, it was direction. A way of moving me through a room without ever having to ask where I wanted to go. I hadn't been chosen. I'd been in a probationary period, and I never once got told the terms. I started thinking, too, about the husband. Not because I had any reason to. I want to be clear about that. I didn't have evidence of anything. But once you understand that a person is capable of shaping someone else's entire reality without ever raising his voice, you start wondering what else that person might be capable of shaping. A donor at the first fundraiser had said something I hadn't thought about in months. Something like, it was so sudden. Nobody really got a straight answer on what happened. I'd taken it at the time as ordinary grief talk, the kind of vague thing people say about death. I didn't take it that way anymore. I don't think Desmond did anything. I want to say that clearly because I don't have proof of a single thing beyond how he made me feel small in ways I didn't notice until I was already small. But I noticed for the first time that I couldn't say the opposite with any confidence either. I also started noticing something uncomfortable in myself during that stretch. A moment at a bar, weeks later, where I caught myself turning on a version of charm I recognized instantly, calibrated, deployed, aimed at making a stranger feel like the only person in the room. I stopped mid-sentence. I didn't like how easy it had been to find that switch. I put it away. I haven't gone looking for it since, but I know now that it's there. I saw him again 8 months later. Not on purpose. I was having dinner with friends at a restaurant across town, somewhere I'd never been with him. He was seated near the window with someone new, younger than me if I had to guess. Dark hair, the kind of open, hopeful face I'm sure I used to have before any of this. Desmond had his hand resting on the back of the young man's neck. I watched his thumb move once, slow, absent, like he wasn't even thinking about it. The exact same motion. The young man was laughing at something Desmond said, laughing the specific, grateful way you laugh when someone powerful has chosen to be delighted by you. I knew that laugh. I used to make that exact sound. I sat there with my fork halfway to my mouth, and for one long moment, I considered walking over, saying something, anything, "Girl, run!" But I didn't have proof. I didn't have the right. And the young man was looking at Desmond the way I once had, like nothing anyone said tonight could touch what he was feeling. I put my fork down and I didn't finish my dinner. I never found out what happened to him. I think about him more than I'd like to admit. I think sometimes about a husband I never met and a sudden heart condition nobody got a straight answer on. I have no proof of anything. I just know what it feels like to be shaped by someone until you can't remember which parts of yourself were always yours. I'm Dark Veil. Sometimes interviews never really end. They just find the next candidate. If you enjoyed this story of manipulation and control and how it can terrorize you, you might enjoy the video on the screen. It's a different kind of manipulation, but with equally horrific results.